Well, good day, fine people, and welcome to the Large Impact podcast series. And today we are thrilled to have Stuart Butler, the Chief Marketing Officer from the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, with us. Um, he is a remarkable human, and he's making a large impact. Like I would think, like every minute of every day. So, welcome, Mr. Butler, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you, Becky. You're very kind. I'm honored to be here for sure.
So, the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, when I first started the Autism Friendly Travel Initiative back in 2016, Brad Dean was really, he was the chief executive officer of the chamber at the time, latched on immediately, gave me ideas on, you know, accommodations tax funding, because we are considered a travel initiative, and then introduced me to Susan Phillips, who was the CMO at the time. And it was just, you know, the chamber has always been supportive of, the travel initiative and just making the Grand Strand and the Myrtle Beach area more autism friendly. And I feel like I've known you forever, and the impacts that you have made, and the programs that you have developed in support of this, it seemed, incredible. And then I was looking at your bio, and it reminded me that you've only been there just a little bit over 2 years. And
Yeah, it's been quick.
it's just amazing what you have done. And, the other part of your bio is that, you've been here in the States since the early 2000s, and that you actually have a degree in rocket science. So I'd
Yeah.
really like, which is amazing,
Ah.
just so, but part of it is that, like, what from your rocket science background
Mhm.
or your life experience or your parents or your how you were raised has brought you to be like this um phenom in, no,
It's very
really, I
kind.
mean,
Um,
in
well,
what in all your efforts. And it's not just towards autism, but like autism, like we'll get into that in a little bit, but like, wow.
mhm.
So
Well, it's hard. I mean, that's a really good way to frame a question, and I could go in a million directions. I think the easiest way is to say I've always been different. Like I've always had something that has made me separate from other folks, and but my parents, especially my mom, would never let that be something that held me back. So I was born with um, it's considered severe myopia. So myopia being short-sightedness, basically. My eyeballs are football shaped instead of spheres, which means I literally, without contact lenses, can't see past the end of my nose. And even with contact lenses now, because I also have a retinal cone dystrophy situation going on, which means my central vision is a total blur. But that didn't come until late 20s, early 30s. But my camera just dropped off. Hold
yeah.
on one sec. Um, but essentially, the first 3 years of my life, I couldn't see. And no one really identified this. You know, I grew up in England. We had the National Health Service, which I think that a lot of folks like the idea of socialized medicine over here, but I can tell you as being someone that's experienced it for the first 23 years of my life, it has some trade-offs, right? One of them being under resources, one of them being they try to minimize the amount of treatment and observation that happens. And so literally, I remember growing up, and I still have memories of this. There was a TV show in England called Play School, and it was like every kid watched this growing up because we only had three TV channels, and it was on twice a day. And so my mom would sit me down in front of it in the morning, so I could literally press my nose up against the screen and see it. And then my brother would watch it in the afternoon because he was a couple years older than me, and he couldn't see it when I was watching it because my big old head, my big old noggin was in the way. So um, from an early age, I navigated the world different. I saw, in quotation marks, the world a little different. But my mom wouldn't let. She was the biggest advocate for me, which I think anyone with any condition needs an advocate, right? And typically that falls on the mom. But my mom just wouldn't stop. And then finally, when I was about 3, she found a doctor that was really willing to take the case on and identify the situation. And I'm gonna try to figure out my camera because it keeps, I don't know what's going on here. Um, but the doctor finally said, yeah, you're 100% right. There is a challenge here. And they got me, what would be considered sort of beer bottle sized glasses. And for the first time at 3 years old, I could see the world. And I'd never seen, she tells me a story. I don't remember. I was so young, but she tells me I walked outside and saw a mailbox for the first time, or a post box, as we call it in England. And they're bright red. And then I saw an ambulance go by. And then she took me home, and one of her closest friends and my best friend's mom was there. And she said, I spent 10 minutes just touching her face because it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And so I think I developed a way, my brain, I can visualize things in my head in a way that I don't think is normal. I'm a little abnormal, I guess. And I learned that at an early age, you can do anything you want regardless of your situation. You just probably have a different path to getting there than other people, right? And so my mom was the one that really instilled that in me. And it carried on throughout my life. I wanted to play soccer, and I had these big thick glasses on, and they were like, you can't play soccer with big thick glasses. And she's like, why not? And they're like, well, it's dangerous. And so she helped me figure out, okay, let's strap them on, let's tape them up, whatever we need
Duct
to do.
tape,
And so
wrapping around, right?
yeah, and so not only did I end up playing soccer slash football in England, but I ended up being the first, and to my knowledge, only ever goalkeeper captain of my primary school soccer team. Because I'm naturally, I like to solve problems and I like to inspire people, and so I've always sort of fallen reluctantly into leadership roles, but that carried on throughout my life. People would tell me, you can't do this, it's not possible, and I would say, hold my beer, watch me.
Right.
And so that's my mentality. I'm very driven. I'm very acute. I guess I have an innate ability, God given or whatnot, that allows me to see a problem and then quickly visualize a potential solution. It's not always the right solution, but I sort of always love solving puzzles, and so I put together pieces of things really quickly, and then I'm relentless. And it's gotten me a long way. It's also created some friction along the way. I struggle sometimes with some of our partners and our vendors because I'm never satisfied. I always want to do more. Like there's always a bigger opportunity. There's always something like, we're going to talk about autism a little bit in a second, but the stat that first led me down this path of we've got to fix this was the IBC CES's stat that said 87% of families who have kids on the spectrum don't take family vacations. And I'm like, as someone that didn't take a lot of vacations growing up as a kid, I really cherish it now with my family. And I think for families to not get that experience for whatever reason is unacceptable. And I want to solve it. So that just was like, I was a dog with a bone once I heard that stat. And it was around the same time I'd met you. And I'm like, right, we can do something about this. And so I've been like that my whole life. But the other thing I feel like I do fairly well is identify my weaknesses and then identify people that offset my weaknesses. Like I have a lot of weaknesses, as we all do. Like I'm not particularly detail oriented. I can see a big picture and I can put together a framework, but I need folks around me that can really execute. I don't love crowds of people. I don't love social interaction with large groups, and so I need people around me that can sell or interact with others and build those relationships. It's not necessarily my strength. So I know how to build a team, and fortunately, I landed here 2.5 years ago at the chamber, and I already had one of the most high functioning, successful teams, certainly in our region, if not in the world. I've never worked with a team that is so efficient and effective. And, although, we're talking about me today, I really need to acknowledge that none of this would happen if it weren't for this amazing team that I, in some ways inherited, but hopefully have help to nurture and at least set a vision for. But that starts with the top. Like Karen Reardon, our CEO and president now, she's someone that cares deeply about a lot of people. Certainly folks that maybe haven't always gotten a fair crack at it, and she's done a lot of work, including You work with our DEI council and appointing someone to head up our DEI initiatives. And, we include accessibility under that umbrella. And so we're always looking to help people that need a little leg up or maybe haven't always been given a fair crack at it. So she was one early on that identified Champion Autism Network and the autism community as an opportunity for us to make a difference. And I said, when I took this job on, the reason I came from sort of the private industry to a nonprofit was I felt like I would be in a better seat to make a dent in the universe. And I got to say, this autism community work we're doing is probably a bigger dent than I even imagined. And it's the work I'm probably more proud of than anything else I've ever done in my career. And I've done some crazy cool stuff in my career, but this is something else.
Tell us
Next
about
level.
a top crazy cool thing that you did in the private sector. Because you've mentioned a few things and I'm like, oh my gosh. Because you came from where to come to the chamber?
So I came from a digital agency called Fuel Travel. We were independent agency, locally owned. Scott Brandon, who owns the Brandon agency, was one of the principals when I joined it back in 2001. It was called IntelliStrand at the time, but we did a lot of stuff. I mean, we were really the group that in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were the first company to really get Myrtle Beach area on the internet. And so Myrtle Beach, I don't know that people realize this, Myrtle Beach area was a pioneer in travel planning, especially digital, online travel planning. And in part, that was because the company I was working for built the first ever independent booking engine for hotels that weren't part of a big chain, a big flag. And so we built that technology. We built a lot of really cool hotel technology. But along the way, I mean, one of the other projects that I worked on, which is not dissimilar to what you're doing, is we built a podcast called the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast, which I hosted for 6-7 years. And it was amazing. And I remember when the pandemic hit and no one knew what was happening. And we had thousands and thousands of people listening to every episode. And it was tips and tricks and advice for hotels to stay in business, basically. In general, that was what we did, how to market a hotel. And when the pandemic hit and everyone was like, oh no, what's going to happen here? And we all went through that sort of roller coaster of, I'm hearing this thing in Asia and it's probably going to be like swine flu and this other stuff. It'll probably blow over to, oh no, this is actually going to come here and it'll probably last 15, 20, 30 days. And then it was like, oh no, we're done. Like, I don't know, indefinitely. And we were feeling those emotions, and a lot of hotels were. And so we decided to go from a weekly show to a daily show at that point. And for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the pandemic, we were doing a daily show of, here's how you can survive as a hotel, especially an independent hotel. And we started getting letters in from people saying, you literally saved my business. Like I was about to shut it down. I was going to lose everything. My life's work was down the drain. But this piece of advice that you guys gave us, turned it around, and now we're doing better than ever, and so that was really heartwarming, because you don't think, oh, I'm really making a difference in people's lives when you're just dealing with hotel marketing, right? Well, no, you really are, because these people, that their hotels it's their life, it's their passion, and it's their purpose. And so that was really impactful. But even before that, I've worked on some really impactful stuff. I've always wanted to help people. Back in college, technically, yes, I have a rocket science degree, but it's strictly speaking, it's physics with space science and systems. That was the actual name of the degree, but it was a lot of rocket science. There's a lot of problem solving, but it taught me a lot of really valuable lessons that I still apply today. And some of that was managing complex things in an orderly way, like putting together a project plan. Applying the scientific method, having a hypothesis, and then learning to prove or disprove that. And so that's sort of what I've always done throughout my career is say, identify the problem, come up with a hypothesis of how you might solve that, and then build an experiment to say, are you right or wrong? And, a lot of times you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and you adjust. But I mean, that the rigor of that scientific method is what I've applied to everything I've done, including what we're doing now around autism. So yeah.
you're talking about, and you're ridiculously creative and entrepreneurial, and now when did you feel like when you first came to the chamber, and you're talking about this, like when you were, I guess, interviewing or whatever for the job, or was it kind of like, you're just going to have to give me some latitude and trust me? Is it kind of kind of type thing, or
Yeah, a little
was
bit.
there like a sales process, or you know what I mean? I just
Yeah,
nonprofits are different, you
they
know?
are. And they move a lot slower.
Yes.
It's and destination marketing inherently is, which is what I really do. We're the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber and CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we're really, my day job is promoting the Myrtle Beach destination to visitors in an effort to improve the quality of life for the residents. That's essentially a short version of what the elevator speech of what I do. It's all about local residents and improving the quality of life through the visitor economy. But when I came here, I was very fortunate because I had sat on the board of directors for 2.5 years before I interviewed for
Oh,
the
okay.
position.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the privilege of being the chair of the marketing council, which is sort of the oversight committee that sits atop of the organization from a CVB perspective. And so I'd had a lot of my fingers in the pie, as it were, probably a little too much. I know I was probably frustrating the staff. I remember at one point, Karen lovingly pulled me aside. She's a great mentor and a coach. So she pulled me aside and said, "Don't forget you're a volunteer," you know, meaning, hey, you're trying to be a staff member as a volunteer, and don't forget you're a volunteer on the board. And so it sort of realigned my expectations. But when my predecessor decided he was going to leave, and I found out about this, I was one of the first to find out about it because I was sitting on the exec committee at the time, which is sort of the chairs of the different committees form the executive committee. And it just sort of, something spoke to me and said, "Hey, this is a really big opportunity for you to make a difference." It just so happened that within the same week, the agency we ran in the software company had just sold our software division to a publicly traded company. And so it felt like a good bookend. Like I'd been there for 20 years. I'd built this baby with a lot of help from a lot of other folks, but it felt in a lot of ways like it was my baby that was getting sold. And there was a lot of emotion that went along with that. And so it just felt like the stars were aligning. And sometimes it's like you get a sign and it's hard to ignore. And so I threw my hat in the ring for this, and I had a lot of conversations with the search firm that was doing the looking for the candidate, but also the committee that was doing the hiring, especially Karen. And Karen and I had already built a good relationship because I'd been on the board. But I think my biggest concern coming in, or my biggest potential hurdle was the fact that I knew and I respected Karen as a great marketer. She came from the agency world as I did. And I didn't know how that dynamic was going to work. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram personality types, but both she and I are 8s, which basically means we're both challenges, means we're very type A, but we're also can be a little disagreeable, and we're very opinionated, and we don't always respect authority. Like that's my personality in a nutshell. And so I mean, candidly, I was a little nervous coming in. I'm like, I've never been someone that has worked well when I was micromanaged. And so Karen and I had talked it through and said, "Listen, what are the rules of engagement?" She said, "I'm going to leave you alone. I'm going to let you do it. I want you to keep me informed. I want you to, always run stuff by me if you're unsure, but you're the CMO, and I'm going to let you CMO it up." And so, and she's been true to our word ever since. I think we still have a really, really positive, strong relationship. We don't always agree, but we know how to discuss agreeably when we disagree. And we know that we both very much motivated by the same objective. We want to serve our community. We know we're both here to bring positive impact to our business community, to our local residents, to every community that we have here. And so we know that about each other, and we found a really healthy way to navigate any kind of disagreement on vision or anything like that. But the good thing is 99.9% of the time we are aligned, and we do agree, and so it's been fun. But you know, you're right that nonprofit organizations move at a glacial pace compared to for-profit organizations, and they're not motivated by the same things, right? A lot of times, for-profits are motivated for the dollar, right? And they want to make sure that they're profitable and they're growing and things like that. And our KPIs are different than that. Ours is about community health and we want to see growth in terms of how many investors and things like that. But it's we want to make sure the community is healthy and happy, and that our mission is being followed, which is to promote, protect, and improve. So it was an adjustment. It took me a good 6 months, and I've seen other people come here in this organization since I've been here, from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world, and every time I see them go through that same learning curve that I went to, and every time I'll try to sit them down and grab a coffee or whatever and say, listen, I see what you're struggling with, and it's okay. I went through it too, and here's what I learned, and maybe this can help you. And so I think as long as we're all aligned in the mission, as long as we're all trying to row in the same direction, we sort of figure it out eventually. Some of us, it takes a little longer than others, but we learn some hard lessons along the way. But it's fun. I've never had more fun in my career than I am right now. So,
well, that's good. What's
yeah.
the funnest thing right now lately? Because I know that you've
Oh,
got a lot of ideas and a lot of
yeah.
balls in the air and
Yeah, I mean, I love the nerdy stuff, right? I love the data. I love, we're doing a lot of work to build a very complex data infrastructure, and that, when we make a breakthrough in that, it's a lot of fun. One of the things we've been working on over the last 2 years is trying to figure out how to use existing data to predict what's going to happen in the future. It's predictive modeling, and we've made some really big strides in that over the last year, and to the point where we're going to be able to figure out with pretty high degree of certainty that what the occupancy, what the tax revenue, what the number of people in town is going to be 6 months from now, based on what we do. And so that's really powerful for our community, because it allows things like the police to staff properly. It allows our cities to budget appropriately. It helps us to know, all right, when is there going to be a soft spot that hurts the community, and how do we pull a lever or push a button that impacts that? So that's the sort of the nerdy stuff that I love. I mean, looking around me, you got like a Lego Nintendo over this shoulder. You've got like Star Wars over here. You got all this kind of stuff. I'm a nerd, so I love the data stuff. But what I've learned, like I used to worry a little bit. I'm tongue in cheek saying this, but I used to worry a little bit about, was I a bit of a sociopath? Not an emotional kind of a guy. Like things touch me at times, but I'm not a very emotional person. I've been criticized in my life for not taking people's feelings into account before I speak.
really,
Yeah, and sometimes I'll say things and they're best intended, but they don't land as intended. And but I will tell you, the work we've been doing recently on some of these autism programs, especially the Traveling the Spectrum TV show. I mean, I just had the joy and the pleasure of watching a first rough cut of the 6 episodes that we created, and I'll talk more about what this project is in a second. But I cried like a baby in the finale. Like I've never been as moved by a piece of TV content then, and part of it was pride that we pulled it off, but part of it was I could see the impact not only that we had on these families, but the impact we're going to have on potentially millions of families. It was, I mean, it hit me like nothing I've ever felt.
Like what is it? You had mentioned that and
So what?
you say specifically to the last episode. So is it because the series is the way the editing has gone, lead you down this path, and there's just like it's like, here you go, like the unveiling kind of thing, or is there like and you probably just don't want to do like a spoiler alert or anything, but
no, I think I can explain it. I think, and I'll try to avoid spoilers, but just to back up a little bit so the audience knows what we're talking about, right? So we one of the initiatives we are developing among a lot of others around the autism community is it's a 6-part unscripted TV project called Traveling the Spectrum. And what we did is we identified 3 families very different walks of life, very different experiences that have a family member on the spectrum and to varying degrees. And we brought them on a trip to Myrtle Beach area. And we said, we're going to help you plan it and I will give you suggestions, but you're going to have a regular vacation and we're going to be there to document it and see the good, the bad, and the meltdowns, right? Because we know with autism that that's, especially in new environments and sensory overload, and when we're tired and cranky, that can create some friction. And we also know that that's an important conversation to be had out in the open because it's one of the stigma points that prevents the people from traveling. We know, and when we talk to the 87% that don't travel, why is it? It's like, well, the logistics are a nightmare, right? We know it's going to be miserable. It's not going to be a vacation, especially for the parents. We know there's going to be judgment. We know that we're going to go to a restaurant and have to leave halfway through. And like there's a lot of friction. And so we're like, well, let's show that friction, but also show how that friction can be eliminated. Fortunately, we have the lovely Becky Large and Champion Autism Network in our backyard that has already done a tremendous job. And we couldn't do any of what we're doing without her and this organization. So we can model and show other destinations and other people some of the simple things you can do to make the experience 10 times better. So we just wanted to document it. And we really didn't know how it was going to go, but we said at the very beginning, we're going to make sure we're honest, we're authentic. It's not going to be scripted. It's not going to be manufactured, Now, did we spoil them a little bit while they were here at times? For sure we did, but they totally deserved it. But it's very much a raw vacation experience for all three families. So these three families all come from different geographic areas. They're all different experiences. That we have the Hill family, Chris and Precious Hill. They have three kids. They had Precious. She had two kids, twins from a previous relationship, and then she married Chris, and Precious had this little bundle of joy called Miko. She's about 3 years old when we recorded. She's a little older now because this was a few months ago, but very nonverbal. She doesn't express much other than a few sort of squeals and things like that. So we had that situation going on. We also had Braden and the Geelink family. And Braden he was about 15 when we recorded and wide open, does not stop talking, Energizer Bunny kind of a kid, and just says whatever comes to his mind. And he has so much joy on the screen.
Oh, it was epic.
He was so cool. And he has an older brother and an older sister. She's in college, but that we brought the whole family of 5 here, and that was cool. And then we had Max and Jake, who are brothers, and they are Max is about 27, I think, when we recorded, and Jake is about 29, and Max is I don't know, how would you describe Max? He's verbal, but he's limited, right, in his verbal capabilities.
Like, he's definitely I guess some people think that people who are with autism, like maybe Max, who are higher functioning because they can different varying degrees. He can toilet himself and like get dressed and things, but he'll never be able to live on his own.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot of capabilities, right? He can get up in the morning, he can walk the dogs, he can make oatmeal. But having a conversation with him is very much needs to be very prompted, and his responses are very monosyllabic and very repetitive, right? And he doesn't express his emotions that often. It's very hard to know what's going on in his head, and he's a little apprehensive about sensory input in new experiences, but super bright guy. Like he taught himself Japanese at 4 years old, so he could read Pokemon cards, because he's like, that's one of his obsessions is Pokemon. Like he knows every Pokemon, every generation, every number. Like he's like a walking Pokédex. But he taught himself Japanese at 4 years old just so he could learn more about it. Yeah. So wow. He's this brilliant guy, like a savant in a lot of ways, but he certainly needs a lot of supervision, right? And so this was their first trip away together for any amount of time. So the way we set this up is each of the 6 episodes shows all 3 families, and we go through start to finish. So the first episode is them preparing, talking about their situation, packing, setting off on the journey. The second episode is them arriving here and getting into their accommodations and sort of talking about the anticipation of what they're going to do. And then the next 4 episodes is showing their experiences. And so episodes 3, really 2 and 3 and 4 are just them out and about and trying things, right? Whether that's a Pelicans ball game, whether that's fishing, whether that's Wonderworks, the aquarium, Skywheel, things like that. So we sort of show them having a family experience, and it's, not always rosy, and there are challenges, but you start to see over those 3 episodes, these families understand a lot more about their situation, understand a lot more about themselves. The parents' relationships change, their expectations of the kids change. And so what we see by episode 5 is everyone begin to have the same realization, which is, it's not only a disservice for me not to have done this before to my family members, but every single person that has the situation similar to ours needs to experience something like this. Because, and I forget who it was, it may have been Chris Hill that said something about, like, they're so protective of Miko, and they're so used to wanting to avoid the friction points that they've created a bubble around her that is doing her a disservice. Because you can see and they were only here for 4 or 5 days, from the first day we met her to the day they left, she was a fundamentally different person and was showing a lot more communication, was showing a lot more willingness to try new things. And, there are millions of people out there that are in a similar situation to that. Like they're so concerned about protecting the person with autism that they shelter them. And I think what this series showed, and what all 3 of these families realized, is if that's your choice, we're not going to judge you, but there is an alternative, and that alternative offers so much hope. So it made Precious realize for the first time. She said, "My daughter's going to be okay." Yeah, we'll probably be caretakers for her whole life, but she's going to be okay. And it made, I think, Braden's family realize, what, there is potentially a path for him to live independently, probably in some kind of home that's set up for folks like him. But before this, they didn't know that. They were like, I think he's going to be with us in our home for forever. And they're like, what? He's shown us this week, and he's only 14, but he's shown us so much this week that gives us that glimmer of hope that potentially there's something more that he's capable of. And the same with Max too. Max was just so willing to go the extra mile to make Jake, his brother, proud. And Jake had no idea that was even, because he doesn't communicate that emotion, right? He doesn't know what's going on in Max's head. And so, but Max was willing to try these things that he would never have tried before because he wanted to make Jake proud. And you could tell how proud Max was when he accomplished something. Like he said he climbed a wall one time. Like and they've done a ropes course, and it was such a good, powerful statement from him, because he's very man of few words. He said, "I climbed a wall," and it was like the metaphor of that was just powerful, And I don't know if he meant it as a metaphor, if he was translating ropes to wall, but man, it punches you in the stomach and says, hey, there's this 90 or 87% of families that aren't traveling. What if, man? What if we can give them the gift of travel? What if we can make it easier for them and reduce that friction and find a way for them to find a way? And knowing that there's support, knowing that there's resources, knowing that there'll be people to cheer you on and help you back up when you stumble. What a difference that would make in this community, And that, it gets me so excited about the prospect, the opportunity. And when I said I wanted to come to this job and make a dent in the universe, I'm 100% convinced that this is one of the biggest dents I'm ever going to have the privilege to try to make in this world. And so it gets me out of bed every morning, and it gets me motivated, and it gets our whole team motivated because we know that it's possible. We've seen it, and we just want to share it with the world. It's something special.
Yeah, you've really kind of changed the face of the initiative, right? And have given it a spotlight. Like we had one, but your creative energies and the way you're doing this, and I wrote down a couple notes, and one of them was you being the reluctant leader. You're just talking about getting up and out of bed, and just trying to push everybody forward, right? I think effective leaders are kind of like behind their teams, not in front of. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really remarkable that way. So here we are at this destination, and what advice would you give to other destinations, in support of this initiative and this um, very large, loyal, and growing population?
Yeah. It's difficult, and it's not something that you can do overnight. We couldn't have done what we're doing now if it weren't for the groundwork that's been laid by Becky and others in this community for the last decade, and so the last thing you want to do as a destination is stop promoting that you have a product, a sensory friendly product, an autism friendly product, if you can't deliver, because bringing more families to a destination and not delivering on the expectation is going to do more harm than good. And so I think you've got to start there. You've got to start. We talk a lot internally about building cathedrals, and the metaphor is one that sort of takes a look at history and how it used to literally take hundreds of years to build some of these beautiful cathedrals. But they started with a plan, a long-term plan, and the people that started that plan were working from the same plan as the people that ended the plan, but it was different people. Like, you've got to build these initiatives that maybe last beyond your term at the organization that you're in. But you've got to start with the end in mind and say, what is the promised land? Where can we get to? And what is the foundational layers we need to lay today to be able to get there in a year or 2 years or 3 years? So I'm always a big fan of having sort of saying we have two eyes, right? And one should be on the here and now and what we're doing day to day and the block and tackle and knocking out the individual tasks. But the other one should be on the horizon down the line saying, well, what's coming next and how do I get there, and thinking that way. And so we work that way. But I think you've got to have a product. You've got to surround yourself with the community you're trying to serve. It's really hard for me. I don't have any family members that are on the spectrum that it's significant enough for me to be able to understand the condition. I was fortunate in that my wife was a speech language pathologist, and a lot of her little friends, she was a pediatric speech therapist, so she called her patients her friends, and her friends, she had a lot that were on the spectrum. So I got to meet a handful of them and really get to experience them. But my first real contact with autism was, I was a soccer coach when I first moved here to Myrtle Beach. I volunteered at the YMCA and I coached a soccer team. It was my second or third season in, and I had a little boy who was on the spectrum, fairly nonverbal. He could babble, but it was hard to understand him. Couldn't focus. Couldn't follow direction. Like he was a tough one. But it was the YMCA, and one of our values was we want to give equal playing time to players. And so navigating that, like I wanted to give him the biggest opportunity he could have. And it was interesting because he started the team. His brother was on the team too. His brother was not neurodivergent, and so his brother sort of fit in with the rest of the kids. And you could tell that this brother felt the burden of being the big brother of this kid with autism. And about 2 weeks in, I probably made a mistake of leaning on the brother a little too much to communicate to the child that had autism. And I could tell it was bothering the older brother. And so I made a switch, and I just started addressing him, separating the two, letting him have his normal life and letting the kid with autism have his experience. And it ended up being really positive for everyone. I feel like the the joy that I would see on both their faces was tremendous. But I sort of had to learn the hard way. There wasn't anyone coaching me on how to interact with this situation, and so I think we I was lucky and I got through it, and it was a positive experience for everyone. But I think for destinations that are looking to do the work, go find the people in your community or nationally that understand the autism community, that are part of the autism community, and just go start having conversations and listening and understanding what the challenges are and what the needs are. And don't prescribe a solution before you really understand what the needs are, because being someone myself with a disability, it's very frustrating when people make assumptions and try to intervene when I don't need them to intervene. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, I see things very close up fairly well, and so I'll have my phone really close to my screen or whatever, and people will make jokes like, well, do you need glasses, or you need some help doing this? And I'm like, no, I'll let you know if I need help, but I appreciate it. But I think don't make assumptions about someone. Ask questions for sure, but don't make assumptions, and go integrate and interact with the community you're trying to serve, whether that's the autism community or any others, and understand every facet of it. Because one of the things I love about this Traveling the Spectrum TV show that I think is going to make as big an impact as anything is, not only are we destigmatizing the condition and bringing awareness and education about autism, we're showing that these families are normal families. They have a kid on the spectrum, but they're normal families just like any other. And so the parents are having the same marital challenges, the same financial challenges, the same hopes, dreams, and concerns for their kids that anyone else would have. And I think we too often in society take a group of people, especially people with accessibility challenges or disability, and say they're other, they're different, right? So let's treat them other, let's treat them different. And I think it's the wrong way to approach it. I think we've got to look at everyone as an individual. Every single person I've ever met wants to be communicated with in a slightly different way. Every person I've ever met needs to be navigated a different way, encouraged a slightly different way. In autism and other disabilities, and they're different than that. Like, treat people like individuals, understand what's unique about that individual, but also understand at the end of the day, we're all more similar than we are different. Every one of us is more similar than different. And so, go in there and understand that. Don't treat people like other. And I think you're going to have some success, but just know that success is going to come over time with a lot of effort from a lot of people, a coalition of people. And you're not going to be able to do it on your own. You have to surround yourself by the community. You have to surround yourself by advocates. You have to surround yourself by services and providers that are going to help that community. And buckle up, because it's going to be a fun ride. That would be my advice.
Seems like you're right. So as you're talking, I'm filtering this as a parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about the soccer with the older brother, and and you could sense him feeling the burden, right? Which really happens with a lot of the siblings, older, younger.
Yep.
And then, you were talking about, surrounding yourself with experts and all that stuff. And, you're a normal family, or, just like we have all these other problems. And it wasn't until my son was a sophomore in high school, like, whenever we had these tantrums and meltdowns or whatever, always trying to dissect, like, what was it? Did he get bullied in school? Was it the tag in
Mm-hmm.
his shirt, right? They can't communicate, so they have these tantrums and meltdowns. And I, uh, we created our own bubble. And it wasn't until
Mm-hmm.
he was a sophomore where it was like, we have to, look at him as an individual, right? He's, there's so much more to him than autism, and then kind of support
Mm-hmm.
that person in that way. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, because I feel like, we're still in a bubble,
Mm-hmm.
he created this lifestyle where we don't or didn't do a lot. And
Yeah.
now I feel like, with 18 and 20-year-olds, there's a lot of guilt that goes with,
Yeah.
any parenting, I guess. But all we can do is the best.
We do our best and do what we think
Right?
is right, and it's not on anyone to judge you, right? Because we all
Yeah,
live
no
our own life.
judgment. That's the worst part. Right? That's what I'm stopping.
And I think that's my favorite phrase is "Don't yuck my yum." Like don't turn your nose up to something I like,
Don't
right?
yuck my yum. I gotta write
Don't
that.
yuck my yum, right? If I like something,
All right.
don't be telling me that it's not good because I like it. It's my choice, right? And so I think it's the same with this. Like we're all living our own life experience. There's not a right way and a wrong way. There's multiple ways, and we can learn from each of them. And I would say the experience you have of did I do this right as a parent is a normal thought process that every parent has about every child that's ever been born, right? And so yours is slightly modified because yours are specifically related around autism. And I will say that, in my limited experience, I'm certainly not an expert on autism, but I think given the way the symptoms manifest for a lot of these folks, exposure in general tends to have long-term a positive impact from my observation. Not in every case, I'm sort of generalizing, but I think in general, over time, exposing people to things versus not exposing them to things tends to lead to a positive outcome in general over time. And so I think we certainly saw that with all three of these families. Now there's a balance with everything, right? I think if you throw your kid into something too deep too soon and there's a very negative response, it can be traumatic and it can undo a lot, right? So I think you've got to find your balance. You've got to find your comfort zone as a parent or a caretaker as well, because let's be honest, we all could benefit from exposure to the things we don't understand, to the people we don't understand. I think this world we live in would be a lot more friendly and a lot less divisive if we all exposed ourselves to more opinions or more perspectives. I think most of the hatred and the bigotry in the world comes from a lack of understanding. And whenever I've had challenges with people in my life that I've maybe not been, felt positively about, the more time I spend with them, it tends to be that I understand them more, and it resolves a lot of the conflicts. And so, travel to me is one of those things you can do that exposes you at an accelerated rate to new experiences. And so, for people on the spectrum, especially who will benefit from that, I think it hurts me, it makes me sad to think that there's 87% of these families are just not willing to give it a try, especially when I know that they're capable if they are given the opportunity, given the resources, given the framework, and if we as society do our part to help with that, right? And one of my real deep hopes from this show is that neurotypical families are going to look at this and say, oh, I'm part of the problem. Let me help. Like, how can I help? And I remember when I did the Champion Autism Network training, which shameless plug for Becky, if you have a business and you haven't gone through that training, go through that training. It's very inexpensive. It is eye-opening, and it will change how you perceive people with autism. But you guys talk a lot about the shame and the stigma and the embarrassment, right? When the kid's having a meltdown. And that's one of the triggers that led you to being more sheltering of your kiddo. Just smile, just a smile. If you're a family sitting across the restaurant and you see a mom or a dad that's really struggling, and you know that they're embarrassed and they don't want to be seen as a bad parent, just give them a smile and tell them it's okay. That will make all the difference in the world. And
That's simple.
That smile can transform an entire experience, an entire life. It can change the trajectory. You don't know if that kid having that meltdown in that restaurant that you're in today is the first time that family's ever been to a restaurant, or it may be the last time they ever choose to go to a restaurant because of the way you chose to interact with them. Like, if you judge them, you may have just been that catalyst that made them say, no, I'm shutting down, I'm pulling back, I'm never going to go to a restaurant again because of that one person was super mean and judgy to me. And you can make the difference in those families' lives. So just let's have empathy, let's have love, let's lead with love, as you like to say, Becky. And man, we can make a difference. We can make a dent in this universe. I really believe it.
Well, we're doing it. And Stuart Butler, yeah. Oh, so wait. So just real quick, we got just a few minutes left.
I got as much time as you need.
So I just what is like a normal or your like Saturday? How do you when you're not at the chamber, what do you
Uh-huh.
and like, if you were gonna go to what's your favorite food and drink?
Well, so I got the you know when people ask you what your favorite movie is, and it depends on who you're with, who the
Yeah,
group is,
yeah.
you might change your answer,
So it's
right?
at like
Uh,
lunchtime.
okay. Well, so if I'm with like people I'm really comfortable with, and I don't care if they're going to judge me, and they say, "What's your favorite movie?" I'll say Return of the Jedi. If I'm with a fancy group of people and I'm trying to impress them, and I don't want them to know I'm a complete nerd, I'll say The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh God.
Both of my favorite movies, right? But one is probably held in a little higher esteem than the other. So, um, it would depend on the scenario, right? So if I'm going out for date night with my wife and we're going somewhere fancy and we want to like paint the town, I guess as it was, what that we either we live in the Old Pine Lakes neighborhood, the Pine Lakes neighborhood, not the Old Pine Lakes neighborhood, and so we'll walk to Chow and have a
Okay.
wonderful evening at Chow, or we'll go to the library, which is super fancy, and then we'll go to 88 Keys next door, which is owned by the same guy by Shaq, and listen to some piano music and drink a martini or whatever like that, like highfalutin. I love. But my real answer, actually, this is really perfect timing, because I've got two teenage boys, right? One's a senior and one's a sophomore in Myrtle Beach High School. And we barely see them anymore, right? My oldest one has a girlfriend, so he's out with her or out with his friends, or they're playing soccer or they're doing stuff. So the four of us having family time is not very frequent these days. But whatever reason, the stars really aligned this weekend, and we already donned it the OG weekend because we've recreated a lot of things we did when they were younger, when we had them all to ourselves. So Friday night, we went to Fat Jack's in Surfside. Fat
Nice.
Jack's Fat Jack's wings is their buffalo sauce. Their hot buffalo sauce is the best wings in the Myrtle Beach area, hands down. That is not the official Chamber of Commerce opinion. That is Stuart Butler's personal opinion. Opinions are my own. Um, had a couple of beers and some wings, and then was that? Oh, that was Saturday night. And then Sunday, so yesterday, we got up early. We went to church. We went to the gathering at First Presbyterian Church. My wife was she was the elder representing the session on a baptism for some people we know. And so that was kind of cool, quiet family time. And then afterwards, we went to the old Bull and Bush pub. And this is so cliche because I'm English, right? But we went to the English pub, watched English soccer, wearing our English soccer jerseys, and ate fish and chips. And so it was sort of those are my kind of down to earth experiences. I like the highfalutin, but spending time with the kids with a beer in my hand, watching some soccer, or eating some wings. That's the kind of guy I am.
It truly is special. We had, kind of similar, that Jackson, our youngest, is a freshman at University of Tennessee. So this
Mm-hmm.
was his last weekend home. So if I start to get a little misty-eyed,
Oh, that's tough. I'm getting
but
ready for that. Mm.
oh my gosh. But it was, having the four of us together just to share a meal. We went to Luna down in Murrells Inlet, and
Yeah, I love it.
they're just as they get older, there's so much more enjoyable in a way, because they're
Yeah,
like humans.
yeah,
They're adults, so it's
yeah.
really, really fun, so I get you on that one for sure.
Yeah, spending time with the fam. I mean, you don't appreciate when they're little as much, and then as they get older and it becomes more scarce. That sort of absence makes the heart
Yeah.
grow fonder. I guess they say. So true. Like cherish those moments, and again, that's why we want these families that are choosing to not do that to have those experiences because it's some of the best moments of memories that we've created as a family.
We just got to get out there and give them the confidence. And we're just going to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Stuart Butler, CMO, rock star, also the honoree of our upcoming fundraiser, which is just remarkable. And we're so grateful for all of your efforts in support of people and families living with autism. So God bless you. And you rock
Thank you.
on.
Well, I appreciate it, Becky. I'm humbled and know that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants like you. This could not, none of this that we're doing could happen without you and your organization. So thank you so much.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.